Okay, yeah, hi everyone. This is July 28th, SIG scheduled meeting. This meeting is recorded, will be uploaded to YouTube. Um, Please adhere to Kubernetes code of conduct and standards in these meetings. We've got a few items on the agenda. First, we've got Aldo, an announcement on encouraging new reviewers, approvers.
Yeah, just wanted to give a quick announcement. Some time ago, we asked for people to do more reviews so they could eventually make it to get reviewer status, and that happened over the last year. So we reached 8 reviewers, and at that point we decided that we're gonna separate approvers from reviewers. So approvers are no longer reviewers. This means that in general, we want KEPs to first be reviewed by reviewers before reaching out to approvers, and that should help get some certain level of quality before reaching out to approvers, which are more limited. But that said, we still would like to have more reviewers long term. So if any of you are interested in becoming reviewers, you can continue reviewing PRs, and maybe if you would like to become a reviewer, let us know so we can tag you on certain PRs for you to review first, and eventually you would qualify for this status. But otherwise, let me know if there are other things that you find limiting for you to become reviewers long term, and then maybe we can discuss in another SIG meeting if you have particular concerns about the current status. That's all I have for this topic.
Thank you. Wei, you want to talk about the new Ruko?
Yeah, so this is one work I cooperate with the dark cloud company in China, and the author called Shiming author. The basically it's a fake Kubernetes manager that is similar to KubeMark, but implemented a different way. So basically, you just have one controller in which watch all the API objects like node and the path and maintain their liveness to let them behave like a real nodes and path. So, but on the other hand, the KubeMark spin up each hollow node to represent the fake Kubernetes. So in terms of performance, this tool has much better performance because it's an O1 in terms of time complexity. And then it will be pretty useful in terms of like testing the behavior and the scalability of the scheduling behavior. Like if you want to introduce a new schedule plugin, as well as change some scheduling plugin weights. So basically you just have one bare bone control point and it can spin up at thousands of nodes as you want. So it works well on my local laptop. So you don't need to spend money to spin up real nodes. So finally the project was created as a Kubernetes sub project. We got the naming discussion back and forth for a while, and finally we decided with the Quark, the name, Kubernetes without Kubernetes. So that's it. And stay tuned. There will be a lot of interesting features contributed to this repo, like the support for CA. So basically, you have a bare bone control point, right? And you start with 0 nodes. And once there's unscheduled parts comes in, and we are going to provide CA provider for the cork, and then the CA can spin up nodes as you want. So you can use it to simulate a lot of simulating behavior, like by giving a bunch of workload to check how many nodes you need to accommodate the incoming workloads. And in the other hand, just test literally the functionality of the integration with CA. Yeah, that's it. So stay tuned.
So you will have like something merged into CA that is basically making
actually I implemented a very draft CA provider for the cork, and then it works well, can spin up nodes properly.
So where do they get spinned, like these nodes?
You can think of it as an integration test. So basically, it spins up is just a pure API objects, and the cork will take over the part of the node and maintain their aliveness, like heartbeat to the API server.
Okay, so basically the provider is basically creating objects on the API server, node objects, and you have a controller that keeps them alive. That's it.
Yes, correct.
Okay, but it doesn't do anything else related to pods.
Runtime. Yeah, it doesn't test the runtime behavior. Yeah.
Interesting. That's like a simplified version of KubeMark, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Sounds good.
So in my laptop, I usually spin up 2,000 nodes without any problems. But if you're running KubeMark, you have to spin up 2,000 hollow nodes, and each hollow node usually takes 30 megabytes. So basically, you cannot afford that in a local laptop.
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to test, though, right? Like, there are many cases where you actually want the kubelet running. Otherwise, it's not going to be like very useful.
Yeah.
But like, I can see like why you can use this for like scalability, other types of scalability tests.
Yeah, that's it.
We've got the network aware framework PR and Kubernetes SIGs. In the plugins repo.
Yeah, so this is one PR I mislooked, and yeah, so basically we can bring up another discussion on the reviewers liking our sub project. So for now, I think I do need some help from. Okay, we lost Abdullah's screen. Never mind. So basically, I do really like to get some help from other experienced Kubernetes contributors so that can shift some load from me. So I think, yeah, I apologize for that. This PR has been there for a while, and I noticed Jose and Chen has raised I think it's a session in the KubeCon. Yeah, I will prioritize my time to review that. But I do appreciate any help if any contributor is interesting, can jump in to take another round of review.
Yeah, I'm also wondering like if Mike and Yang can help here if you have some time.
Exactly, and from my side, if you also need help understanding any concept or feature, or if you need more information on the PR, just let us know. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So this is basically a call for participation, I guess, for this item.
It's not for this 125, is it? That network aware framework?
It's in the schedule plugin repo. It's not in the Kubernetes/Kubernetes.
Oh, so this moves. It's not tied to the release schedule. Okay, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, Vinny, in place pod.
Yeah. So the update on this from the scheduling side, nothing has changed except we made some progress on the Wang Chen, who's here. She's been working on the E2E test, and I think we have one of the tests up and running. The other one, I haven't had a chance to look at it very closely yet, but it was failing. And I believe we cannot help that one. That's the one where we expect when we resize a pod, a pending pod that's waiting because there's not enough node capacity, and we resize an existing running pod down, it should get picked up by the scheduler and then get run. But we're looking at the end-to-end status, and the status is going to be reported by container D, a change that needs to happen in container D that gives us the status. So this is a chicken and egg problem where that won't come in until the PR is merged, and then Ruiven has a draft PR ready, and once that is merged, then we'll have the status reporting, the loop is complete, and then the test can run fully. That's my theory on why that's failing. I really haven't had a chance to. We found this issue, I think Wang Chen found this issue 2 days ago, and I've been busy with a few other things and I have yet to get to this, but based on summary code, what I saw, this is what I feel is the issue. So we can merge it with the test commented out. I don't like that, but probably we just merge the one test that is working. That I think is a recommendation. And this is not really due for next Tuesday. The code freeze, this is a E2E test. I think there's 1 more week time for that. So we have a little bit of window to review that. The main thing is, okay, we have this, the code freeze date coming up, and I think Tim Hawken and Derek are on vacation this week. So I'm waiting for the LGTM from them. I was just wondering if one of you from the scheduling side approvers is going to be available to, I can quickly ping on Slack and the existing code, nothing new. Would that work? Alternately, I could get the scheduling changes out into a separate PR. I wish GitHub provided us like the linked PR kind of thing where you can have multiple PRs, but
that's okay. At the end of the day, like it's someone that like Tim or Derek, they have much. Like you don't need our LGTM if they are approving, right? Like
is it?
Because not only LGTMs, because they have higher level.
Yeah, superpower.
Across all the packages, right? So if you got that, you wouldn't need for one of us to do anything.
Okay.
We've already agreed that we've already LGTM the logic, but I'm concerned about the end-to-end test. I'm wondering, like, what was the discussion before? Was it like we will have both of them merged before alpha, or with alpha, I mean, or?
I think the previous agreement we had was that we can merge the current code. That was a few weeks ago, and I was hoping that it would get merged early, like a few weeks back, and then we work on this in the interim, the end-to-end test. And the end-to-end test is to target different aspects of scheduling. But as we develop that, I think there is a problem where we cannot really fully enable it until, I wouldn't say go as late as beta. By beta, of course, it should be, but I would say that merge this and then give some amount of time for Ruiven and the container D to come up to merge their PR in, and then we should be able to enable the test that's failing right now. It's failing because what it does is it looks at the status, and the status is not updated. And I've done that for other tests as well, where if it's dependent on status, I don't I have a flag in the test that says if alpha, then don't fail this test. So essentially, you won't be able to get into beta until Containerd provides support. That's pretty much fail safe, if you will.
But like if Containerd doesn't support, like who's supporting the feature? Maybe it's a simple question, but like if Containerd doesn't have support, then why would this feature be useful at all before Containerd having that support?
The Containerd support has to come in after the CRI changes are merged. They cannot merge in their code until the CRI is up. The CRI has this new fields. What Containerd needs to do is populate the resources field in the container status structure in the CRI, the response to the container status API. Right. And that is a new field that's going in with this main PR.
Okay. So the changes that you are merging are actually blocking the Containerd support?
Yeah, chicken and egg problem. So I initially had this separated out into 2 separate caps for this very reason, but at some point during the development, I felt, okay, all this can go in as one. I think that was kind of my flawed thinking, although others disagree. I felt that, we should have brought it. There's no good answer.
Approved by SIG?
Huh?
Was this approved by SIG?
Yeah. The SIG approved it.
And is there no way we can simulate it in the test? Like basically have someone like, some custom logic to update the status within the test?
I'll take a look at that. I haven't had a chance to look at it closely. Hopefully this weekend, I'll take a look at it and see if there are other ways, maybe looking at C groups or something to see that the pod's been running. I think the signal, I don't know if there's any signal from the scheduler which we can read to see that, okay, the scheduler has picked up. I haven't followed up with Wangchen, but did the logs show anything? The cache was being updated. Have you had a chance to verify that, Wangchen?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. So I think we're going to manually verify that it's, I believe last I looked at this was a couple of years ago, and any update that we make goes to scheduler cache. I don't believe that logic would have changed. So we were going to verify that manually.
Like, that is something, I mean, sure, you can look at it and, it's working, but then like if the unit testing, the continuous testing, it gives us confidence that things are behaving the way that we expect them to behave. Aldo?
Well, to that specifically, I think the integration test that simulates the kubelet should cover that. Because if there is an integration test that does the status update, that should be reflected in the scheduler cache. So at least I would start with having the most comprehensive integration test coverage possible.
Okay, so in the integration test, you're saying that we can simulate what kubelet, a real kubelet is not able to do today.
Right, yes, and that would cover at least this scenario. And that actually, from my perspective, that should be a blocker for alpha.
Okay,
to have integration tests.
Okay, because this is what we're hoping to do in the E2E test. All the infrastructure is there.
The E2E test is also useful, but I mean, we need some confidence without the kubelet as well. The other thing I wanted to ask is the behavior well defined when, it will happen that certain customers will be running an older node that doesn't have the support, right? So is that already covered? And if so, is there an end-to-end test for this?
There's not going to be an end-to-end test for this. The way we are addressing this is by not going GA until N+2. So there in the API, particularly in the API supporting down-level versions of Kube client, we discussed this. And we felt that the cleanest way to do this is have GA happen after the support for down-level on, like, if we for example, if we merge this in 125, then we won't be going GA until 128. And at 128, we don't support anything that's below 125 anyways. So whatever components are there, they should be able to understand.
But during beta, we will still have scenarios where the feature is enabled, but the kubelet doesn't support it.
During beta, yeah, if we do beta at 127, then we should be okay.
Right.
So
but
yeah, it's going to be a long alpha.
Is the behavior not defined? Because sure, we are targeting containerd, but what about other CRIs? Do all of them implemented?
Yeah, I think I got Peter Hunt from Red Hat, I believe. He is Creo owner. He's they're waiting for this PR to merge, and then they'll immediately work on providing support for it. Containerd is already on board. Of course, we already have a draft PR ready for it. And the main reason we did that was to we use containerd in the CI currently. All alpha tests they use containerd, and this E2E test. It's gonna, once that support is in and the latest containerd which has the support has been picked up, I would send a PR that removes this check for, of course, I need to see if other runtimes in the GKE cluster tests are affected. But yeah, once we hit all the checkboxes there, we would be removing this check that disables some tests for alpha. So yeah, this just means that we'll have a long alpha. I don't know how much of a concern it is with the older kubelet, but I think it's a very, very valid concern.
I think I would be okay having an integration test that assumes that a kubelet doesn't support this resizing.
Okay.
Because there could be a CRI out there that doesn't support it. You talked about the two most popular ones, are CRI-O and containerd, but there could be others, and yeah, so it makes sense to have at least an integration test that exercises when the kubelet doesn't support the feature, and make sure
I think
the scheduler works.
Yeah, the outcome of that. Yeah, this is an issue.
I think the main challenge is that how complicated to simulate the kubelet behavior in this scenario. I know maybe there's a lot of logic plumbed into the kubelet, and I'm not sure how complex it can be in terms of implementing the integration test. Because it might be the most complicated case involve the most components we have so far. Like in the before, we do have some features that involves more than two components, like the tenant-based eviction, like the tenant node by condition that involves both the node lifecycle manager in the controller manager along with the scheduler. But those are all components in the control plane. But right now in this feature, we involved a lot of components. So I'm not sure how, maybe it's pretty challenging to implement a new fake simulator for the kubelet.
I'll take a look at it this weekend and see if I can. I'll file an exception anyways to give us a bit more time for this. Looks like Tim and Derek on vacation. We haven't had, the code is pretty much mostly reviewed quite a few times already for the kubelet side, and Derek has to just do one more pass. For the scheduler, I think the blocker is this integration test. The E2E test that we have that's working, that Wong Chen has worked on, we'll bring that in a separate PR, the one test that's working, and then complement whatever is missing. I think there were 3 test cases we were looking at. So Wangqing, if the number 2 test case is failing, can you please go to number 3 and implement that? And the number 2 test case, I'll take a look at it in parallel to see if I can get that into this the integration test, and maybe even add the other 2 as well if it's easy. I just don't know.
Definitely. I just noticed that the number 2 test we talked about before has been covered in the existing node test already. Sure.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. So we actually covered all the cases for pod into and pod pending the scheduler behaviors. The other one is not related to scheduler behaviors, it's node behavior. And the existing node test already cover it.
Okay, so let's get this. I think let's share the results with SIG scheduling on Slack, and then probably see if that's good enough then. But I'm going to look at the integration tests this weekend, mainly because this down level in beta, I want to get a beat on that to see what it really means. At least we should have a coverage. That I agree with that point. Even with the N+2 kind of really staggering with that we are doing, it helps. Okay. This is going to be close.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get that question from the production readiness reviewer as well. When you get to beta, they'll ask you like about the behavior when the feature is disabled, enabled, and disabled back.
Yeah.
And so we would have testing around this, and I don't think that your like beta graduation wouldn't be approved if there are no tests around this.
Yes, I think we already answered that question. The PRR review, Alana Hashman did that, and we already looked at the scenario and answered it. And this was essentially what we came up with, that we'll do N+2. It was part of this solution came out as part of the discussion with them.
Okay.
Yeah, this PR is sprawling, and yeah, it is. It's probably the most challenging PR anyone I've dealt with for sure. So it's cuts across so many components, right? So it's pretty hard. Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's getting this boulder up on the alpha hill first, and then I can congratulate myself there. Not there yet.
Yeah, I remember we started working with this probably 3 years ago.
Yeah, initial design was different, and then the design changed.
I remember
when
was Bobby? Bobby was with us as well. Bobby.
I know. That's why I feel like this PR has gotten me growing old. I want to be done with it
soon.
Oh. Yeah, I think part of it was we implemented with one different version, and then Tim Hawken, he approved the earlier design. Then later on, he had a change of heart, so we had to reset a little bit on where the state of the resize when the kubelet accepts admits certain resize, where you need to keep that state somewhere, and we're storing it in the API. He wasn't really sure about that after the code was done. And then they asked me, hey, can you still take this? Because blame me if my management asks. And I said, I already did. Yeah, I didn't bat an eyelid before blaming you for it. Oh, okay.
We've got one last item on the agenda. The component config graduation to GA.
Yes, I don't know if Kant is here, but basically we are graduating the component config from V1 beta 3 to V1. I mean, we've wanted to do this for a long time already, and we did a lot of iterations in the component config. We felt like this was ready, but the last question that came up is whether our defaults are good. This prompted me to double check on the weights we have on plugins, and yeah, basically the question is whether these weights are good enough for most users. The last time we changed them was in V1 beta 2. No, sorry, actually in V1 beta 3 we changed them for the last time. And the question is whether this is enough. The goal of these weights is basically to give a stronger weight to plugins that are influenced by users' APIs, like topology spreading or interport affinity or taints and tolerations. These plugins have double the weight, and in particular the taints and toleration has triple the weight, whereas the rest, like most pods allocated or least pod allocated, which are now a single plugin, those have a default weight of 1. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this question out there for people to comment if they have a strong feeling about the weights. I'm more inclined to actually let this soak for one more release, but if everybody else feels like we are ready to go to GA with existing weights, I wouldn't block on it. So with that, I open for questions or comments.
Yeah. So my 2 cents here is that for whatever weight we set by default, it cannot satisfy everyone. So what we want to achieve is just for some typical workloads or for some common workloads, it works. And there is the behavior is compatible with it was before. I think that's the goal we want to achieve. We really cannot achieve that this default settings can satisfy everyone. So I can give an example in our internal use case is that one user is used the soft, hard affinity terms. They're using that, but in the lower version it's 1. But even if it's 2, it doesn't satisfy their workloads. So I have to sort of use their workloads to simulate how much weight is good for them. And finally, the weight got tuned to 10. So in this case, we cannot say, okay, by default, we want to use the weight to 10 in our vanilla scheduling offering. So I think the direction is that, okay, the current weights can not be perfect for everyone, but we can come up with some tooling support to help you tune your weight in terms of your workloads. So that's maybe the more feasible option to resolve this situation.
I mean, like, don't we think that anyone who's setting, like, preferred toleration or preferred affinity or preferred spread, basically telling us this is my #1 priority for placement? So I would even think that, like, maybe the weight is something that is configurable, but even like you can think about it in a way that when we score, if any of these, constraints are being set, we should actually just take them into account first and foremost. And so, like, not a 10, like you put it 100,000, I would say, like, right? And it's basically saying, this is your most important thing that we should wait on. If this constraint is not being used at all, if topology space is not being used at all, that weight is not going to make any difference, right? So So you got up to 10, but I think just put it like 100,000, be done with it, right? Like I don't understand why do we keep tweaking these things and trying to balance them with some default scoring strategies that we have when the user are explicitly telling us, I want this. So I don't know.
I think that's kind of a,
Yeah.
sorry.
Go
I think
ahead.
that's kind of a big assumption about, you know, just because they're setting these things that it's going to be the number one thing when there's other stuff like resource allocation that users are probably taking as just, you know, a given that they can't set, which is, you know, usually probably their number one. I think if it's the top thing that they care about, then they're probably setting like a required constraint or something on it, right?
No, I mean, again, with required, you're basically saying don't schedule it at all. It's
Yeah.
like with, yeah, but that's not what they want, right? Like they strongly prefer this. But if
if
you
they're
can,
setting preferred, then like, how do you know that they care about that more than resource allocation, which they can't?
because they said so, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, you could set more, you could set like higher requests on your resources for the pod, but you're also probably just assuming that, I mean, especially if you have like most allocated, you're probably wanting it to be bin packed first and foremost, and then maybe secondary. You have, I want them bin packed, but I also want to prefer to have these, you know, close to each other. So
there's no API, like, and this is one of the things that I tried to propose in the past, that such behavior related to bin packing could maybe we want it to be like exposed the workload level. And so I don't know, I haven't seen one customer saying or like a use case where I want affinity, but not as strong as like I don't know, like it's not it feels to me that when you explicitly mention it, it's basically this is what you want. Yeah. And tuning the weights down is not going to address the case that you mentioned. Does it? Right? It's not like it doesn't solve that problem that you just mentioned.
yeah, I mean, I think that that's the intent here, right? But I don't think that you can, you know, I kind of agree with Way a bit more that there's like, it's tough to make a one like broad assumption about how everyone is going to be preferring
We are,
these.
right? We've already made that. Like by setting defaults, we're making some assumption.
Yeah.
So either case, we are making an assumption. It's not like if we don't increase the weights, we are not making an assumption. We are making an assumption.
I think
right
that there's,
now the assumption is that it's a little bit more balanced, but is that actually the common case where when you specify node affinity, the majority of the users basically are saying, give me a little bit of preference to this? I don't think so.
yeah, I'm not personally like, I don't think that setting these weights to like 2 or 3 really is going to have like, really had as much of an effect as we were maybe looking for with that. And I think that's kind of just what the like config API is for. If you're really trying to prefer something, like the setting is in there to do it. I think making the jump to totally preferring these scheduling constraints is kind of redundant with setting like hard constraints.
I don't think so, because with a hard constraint, the pod would be unschedulable. With the preferred constraint, will get scheduled. So there is a significant difference between the two.
Unless it can't satisfy, well, no, I guess it will get scheduled, yeah.
So basically, the combination of the weights can, to some extent, impact the eventual scheduling if you give a bunch of workloads, right? So I think another angle to look at the weights is that we can set a test to say, okay, by given a bunch of workloads, whether n nodes can accommodate all the workloads. So this is the target goal. Like we just can have 50 nodes to satisfy incoming workloads, but by changing the weight, it might be that it's impossible to accommodate the workloads anymore. So that's in this angle, we can say, okay, the weight might have some problems. Maybe in the previous release, we can accommodate those workloads, but now we cannot. So this is one angle. And the other is that this point I want to raise up. So that we, instead of tuning the weights, I mean, right now, how we look at the weights is that, okay, we create an integration test or unit test to verify it function well. But yes, it does function well, but the eventual goal is that by combining all the priorities and in the user's angle is that, okay, whether it can or cannot afford a bunch of workloads by using this combination, right? So that is I think that's the point of having a default weight. We just say, okay, this is the bar and criteria that why we set this kind of default weights. We want to have 50 nodes to accommodate like 1,000 workloads, and the workload is fixed. And by version after version, we just ensure this test can pass. But if you want to have other tests, if you have other workloads, you can tune your weight yourself, or version over version. So maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna push so hard to actually raise the weights because it's something that can be changed, right? Like as a cluster operator, you have component config to tune them to however you believe that these constraints should behave. My only concern here is one thing, which is pod topology spread. We're using it as the default. We have a default for it, right? And if you want to increase the weight for the plugin, I don't want it to be increased for the default constraint, right? Because the default constraint is just, it's not a customer or user explicitly set constraint, right? For that, I want it to be similar to the other, like, plugins based on resource allocation, etc. But if the user set it explicitly, then I want that to have a much significantly higher weight. So this thing is going to be tricky. We need to do something to allow, increasing weight for pod topology spread, but not for the default constraint. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure
does make sense.
that.
So basically, what you're trying to say is that you want it to be able to make every user-defined scheduling directive have a stronger weight, while the default topology spreading is not affected, or it stays the same.
Yeah.
And that's not currently possible today.
Right. So if you increase the weights for pod topology spread, you're basically going to increase it for the default spreading, and it's going to break everything, right?
Right. It's going to change the default behavior. I think, well, there is kind of a way, because you could increase the weight of the plugin and change the rule, the default rule. To have how is it called, like a bigger maximum, what is that called? Maximum difference, maximum skew, yes. So that it's somewhat possible. It's just not, if I'm increasing the weight of to 2, it's not obvious what rule I should
Q?
apply. Yeah, what SQ I should apply to preserve the same behavior. But yeah, at the same time, it's kind of tricky to. It's kind of confusing to have this extra weight just for the default spreading rule, because then you have to, in your head, you have to multiply them as well. So it's also not obvious.
I don't know, like if the rule is default, then we should normalize the weight. That's, I guess, what it could have some logic to do that, no?
Well, you might actually want to, as a user, you might, as a cluster operator, you might actually want to increase the weight of the default without changing the rule.
True. I mean, sure. We can have another parameter for the. That's going to be confusing, as you mentioned. Anyways,
So
I guess like specifically related to the graduation, I don't think this is related, or is it? I don't think it's related to the graduation. Maybe not.
I guess that could evolve separately in a separate cap if necessary. But I think from this discussion, I'm getting to the conclusion that we cannot have a one-fits-all default, so we can just go to GA with the current defaults and leave it up to people to configure them differently if they want to.
If we decide to change the like the default pod topology spreading weight, could that be more linked to like the feature itself instead of being bound to the API versioning constraints, like you said, like a kept to add that? Because that's the argument that made, right? Is that this is once we're VA, these are for V1, these are.
Yeah, defaults are fixed. The defaults are fixed to the API version. So once sets, we cannot change them.
Yeah, even if that's like we introduce like the feature there to add a different default. Just trying to think of like ways around this here.
It's
a
little cheaty.
Yes.
According to the comment by Jordan, it seems when the API version is GA, we seems don't have weight work around the default weights. It's just there fixed.
Yeah, it's just
so. We have two alternatives, right? Basically, go with these defaults. Given that we are only 1 week away from the code freeze, we have two alternatives. We go with these defaults, or we wait until 126 for the GA graduation and try to come up with some kind of test case, some scenario where we can prove that our weights are good enough for most people.
I don't think we can prove that like they are good for most people. I think I would be okay if we to graduate this as long as this doesn't block us from solving the pod topology spread default constraints versus user constraints case. So if you think that we can add that later, I think we can, right? Like we have a default weight, which is 2. If we add, hypothetically, if we add a parameter to component config that says, oh, set it to 3 or 4 for the default case, right? You can do that. Which is the parameter is to V1.
It would be like yeah, I guess you could always add a float to the pod topology spreading config args But you still have to do the math, right? Like multiply two weights.
Right, but like, I mean, like how to implement it is different from, is this going to block us from
You can
V1?
always add fields.
Yeah, you see,
You can
yeah.
always add fields.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'm okay with graduating as is. It's just like really wanted to highlight, because I've heard that from other customers. Like they are using pod topology spread and say, okay, it's not spreading. Like, well, there are other constraints, but we have weights, etc. And they're telling me, well, I explicitly telling you I want to spread these pods. Don't make any other assumptions on my behalf. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we are missing this kind of test too, because the default topology spread is deprecating, taking over the old selector priority functions, right? We don't have a test that we can ensure the test that works for selector spread plugin, and also it works for the current default weight setting for default topology spread. Right, so that we can have with users' complaints about, like, okay, this works before, but now it doesn't work. I saw one user from Catico complaining about that, but they haven't raised the issue yet. But I guess it's very likely related with default topology spread.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. I guess we can maybe discuss this on the
Yeah.
On the raised PR. I will +1 this from my side to graduate to GA. And others, if you have any strong opinions, please express them on the PR, just for the record.
Yes.
All right.
If you specifically have like customer stories you can share.
Yeah, I will link that to the issue, but they don't have a particular setup for the reproducing steps. But given the code freezing time, I'm not sure if we can fix the potential bug out there. But I will link the Slack discussion there and see if we have time to reproduce that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.